Hello and welcome to the RSnake Show. Today we have Scythe, and Bryson Bort is decided to join us today. He will be going without slides, which is my recommended path forward. People who put slides out there, it always kind of seems a little clunky to me, but so we're going to get right to it. So with that, Bryson, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, we don't care about cornflower blue in your PowerPoint. What we care about is making your enterprise stronger.
That's always a good start.
Yeah. So, well, I guess let's start with the quick origin story. So, Target came to me back in 2016, and I really love the story of Target because the modern cybersecurity ecosystem goes back to that incident in 2012 and 13. Before that, it was pretty much AV and firewalls. That was the whole defensive investment. And you might have a few little things here, and I think this is important to note because one, it recognizes how young our space is. And once we realize how young this industry is, then it kind of puts some other things in relief. And two, it, I think, speaks to the challenge that a lot of cybersecurity practitioners have where they rail and go, the business doesn't get us. Well, that was exactly the same example there. And that's where the Target incident represented a sea change shift in how organizations worldwide budgeted and approached this, which then leads to the Cambrian explosion of investment that started in 2013, as well as that then follows all of that investment in those solutions now providing why you have so many offers and different point solutions to different parts. But it goes back to the budget and the business buying off that there is something of value there for them, right? We're not doing cybersecurity for security's sake. We're doing it to assure an organizational mission. So here we are in 2016. Target has built a world-class security organization, and I say that with complete sincerity. I'd never seen something so incredible. But the problem is whether you spend a lot of money on security or you spend a little bit of money on security, you can still be breached. You can still be hacked. You can still have these problems. In fact, it's even harder to find the edges of your cybersecurity because you've invested so much in it. There is now so much strength in protection and detection. So what do? Well, you need a really sophisticated and comprehensive red team capability because you need the ability to drive the threat signal, right? One of the things that's interesting about cybersecurity is it's an unquantifiable discipline today because there's an infinite number of ways of social and technical, and you have operators and developers and a whole ecosystem of adversary that is continuing to innovate around the edges of what you have. So if you're going to have a red team, you need custom tooling to be able to do that. So when they came to me, they originally asked, hey, could you build us an implant, which effectively would have been an alternative to Cobalt Strike, which was the commercial tool at that time, probably still is. And I was like, well, all right, that's great, but that's a good consulting gig because I'm going to have to keep rebuilding you a tool. Because as you test with these tools, you build a defense to the tool, then you need a new tool. And so I came back to him and I said, well, what if instead of doing that, I built you an extensible framework? You can generate any threat behavior signal that you want on your terms. They were like, oh, you can do that? I was like, yes, I think we in the team, we can do that. And that's where what we call Project Crossbow, which is the origin of Scythe, was born. And it's effectively a modular malware framework with the fact that in the post-access space, malware only has really two attributes. It needs to communicate and it needs to do things on your hosts. And so we turn those into Legos. You can build your own Legos. And the advantage of Legos, why I like this metaphor, is when I build a Lego, I can build all sorts of other things we never even thought about because it's just more Legos in the box. And my imagination is the only thing that limits me from using this Lego in a different way than it was described or the way that was seen in the wild for that adversarial behavior and procedure. So that's the fundamental core of Scythe. And I spent 2 years co-developing it with Target. Realized I didn't know very much about commercial software sales and development from my national security background. Enter Ron Gula from Tenable and Dmitry Operovich from CrowdStrike. And in 2018, Project Crossbow was officially unleashed into the general market as Scythe.
Great. So let's jump in.
Okay, let's do some demos. All right, let's all shake some salt for the demo gods.
Man, I'm glad I don't have to do this because my demo karma is horrible. I don't know what I did in the
Thanks for
previous
fixing
life.
me. I really appreciate
No,
that,
no, everyone
Robert.
else's demo's been fine. It's mine. It's been a nightmare.
Okay. So let's start with showing some of those pieces. So I'm gonna kind of go a little bit backwards here, in that I'm gonna show you how the tool works, and then we're gonna show you what the value of that is. Because fundamentally, I mean, the value, high level, right, as I described it, is red is effectively quality assurance to your enterprise stack. And the idea is, how do I do that easily? How do I automate that? Because security is a constant fight against gravity. So my ability to maintain the perch that I've earned is valuable. And the key thing is, let's not just go with assumptions, right? I'm buying a software tool that supposedly does XYZ. Well, let's see that. Let's see how it works. Great example I've seen of that is, there's some anti-ransomware tools out there, but the way that they work is important, because it's not that they can be anti-ransomware across the board. There might be a particular flag that I need to check. So in terms of prevention and detection, this is a way to systematically walk through and validate that for yourself. So how we do that is, let's start with the easy button. So threat manager. So what we do here is, clients every month get an automatic CTI update, because threat intelligence, of course, is a large part of this. What are the adversaries doing? That matters to me, so I can get that and validate the vulnerabilities, the potential gaps that I have in my defense in depth and infrastructure to do something about that. And so energy's been in the news a lot lately. So let's just look at the threats here that are done for energy. So these are all automatically in our catalog. And like I said, we update these monthly. We also have a specialized subscription we call Empower. And Empower, what that does is, it has a service level agreement where we'll turn the threats around in a few days when they've been spotted in the wild. And we provide two things. So you'll see like one of these where it says IOCs.
Mhm.
And the idea there is that, going back to threat intelligence, the bottom part, the hash, the domain, the IP, the core components of a campaign, those start to become stale very quickly, because those are very easy for an adversary to change to keep their campaign running, even after parts of it get caught. But when a campaign is initially started, it's an easy way to quickly ascertain if you have a problem in your environment, and then moving on to the more sophisticated behavioral components. So here you see, with based on CISA, we built up a campaign, and you can see the different steps that are described. Everything is tagged, of course, into MITRE ATT&CK, because that is de rigueur. And then you can create your own tags. But the idea here is, this is a threat intelligence that will provide you. And the difference with the threat intelligence you're used to is, it actually does what the adversary is trying to detect. So there's a lot more depth to the value you're going to get over it. And then moving beyond IOCs, so we're going to go down to Volt Typhoon, who's been in the news for energy.
Sure have.
Yeah, sorry, we have too many threats in the catalog. Oh, go back to typing energy. There we go. So you can see we have both an IOC, and then we have a behavioral based threat, because that's, of course, the thing that has the most long lasting value, right? IOCs catch now until they get stale as the adversary changes. But if you can focus on the behavioral components of adversarial behavior, you're going to start catching things that have never been seen before, because there's going to be that behavioral collision in procedurally what they can do in your environment. So we see here, Volt Typhoon's been targeting energy, government, transportation, water, and infrastructure. That's great, Bryson, but what exactly does it do? So we can see that it's a Chinese threat. We can provide our own customizations. Again, going back to the fact we want to be behaviorally focused. I think one of my favorite ones to really note is jitter, because this is the easiest way to evade network detection for command and control. From what I've seen in the real world, if I were to establish, and again, this really comes to where tool being automated is value, if I can replicate a behavior that's really hard to catch, that's the end of where I want to be able to go and what my defensive tools can do. And jitter is a great way to do that, because it provides a randomization on the heartbeat for an implant. So it's just showing you some examples of where you can really like tune this to be even more complicated out of the box to match the risk profile you're interested in. And then we can see the transparency of what the threat does. So we see here it loading all of its modules. This is, again, part of one of the things that differentiates us since we grew out of the red team space into the blue and purple space is a real world threat doesn't drop all the crown jewels on the first step because they might be in the wrong spot. They want to feel safe. They want to feel like they're not in a sandbox. So typically what they do is they drop some small stuff, and then part of the campaign is calling back and building itself up. So we can see it doing it here. And then from there, now it starts doing a whole bunch of things. And here we steal credentials. Here we're archiving and exfilling credentials. Sorry, I can't see you while I'm presenting. So
I'm just curious, like what happens then? So like you have this template. Do you package this up into sample malware that they can test with, or like what's the end result of this step?
Yeah, so let's answer that. What is the architecture here? What are we doing? So the Scythe server is your command and control, your configuration, and your operator server. Mm-hmm. So what you do is the output of what I'm showing here is a just-in-time compiled payload. So in different executable formats, different DLL formats, you can get it. You can get the shell code. So for the real sophisticated folks, you have the ability to make your own mods. For the folks, even if you're a blue team, this is an easy way to press a button and get those behaviors driven in your environment to check whatever you're doing. Because why are we validating security deployments after they're in the operational environment? If we can tie that in to being something that we do as a part of configurations before we push, well, wouldn't that make sense? And here's an easy way for a blue to be able to do that. Which goes to, there's kind of two philosophies. The one that I think everybody's familiar with is the threat-informed defense approach, right? Let's take a threat, i.e. what I'm showing you here, and let's run those, particular threat behaviors. But I think another way that a lot of folks are starting to go to is to be more detection engineering friendly. Instead of doing a realistic threat, why don't I do behaviors that would be tuned to or chosen specifically to validate a particular control? And so that's just a wrapper in what we're doing here. So this is the threat-informed approach. And right now we're building a control-informed approach, which we call hygiene and threat exposure, so that it's, instead of it being a realistic threat behavior, it's just like a whole amalgam of appropriate threat behaviors to validate that particular control.
Okay, so I get this output. Let's say it's a executable or something. Is the idea then that I throw this on like a virtual machine or something, run it, and see if my IDS system is doing what it's supposed to be doing, or source system or whatever? Is that the sort of the end goal there, is to validate other security controls?
Even further, production.
You actually
want to run
this
in
prod?
production. So that's one of the advantages that we have here. You see here, this is our own code, or your own code, built from scratch, and then spitting out a piece of code that acts like a payload. The architecture also allows you to be agent-based. The difference for our agents is we look at those as injection points. So you have a controlled injection point where you can kick this off. And then one of the customizations is you can build guardrails into this. So you have complete control over the timing, the location, wherever this would run.
Okay, so now I'm getting the Lego component here. So if I really need to be testing this one security feature over here, and it's only going to trigger in this very specific way, I could add that Lego into this and cause it to trigger, or hopefully cause it to trigger.
Yeah, and even in here, so I'm now creating that from that threat. So I'm building my own Volt Typhoon. And what I was talking about right here's where I can, I'm going to show this assessments module later. So this is a procedural and detection engineering capability, because the first thing I'm doing with the payload, of course, running it in production. And we've had success running this at the high level of OT as well, which I think is really valuable to helping that IT-OT convergence from a risk assessment perspective. We have a number of manufacturing and energy customers that use it. And then this is another cool piece. So the auto pause, this is really meant to support purple team exercises, because I run something. I don't want to run the whole thing. I want to go step by step with me saying, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm doing. And then where I was talking about the ability to restrict the device to only run where and when I want it to.
Oh, that's clever, because I could see this accidentally getting copied all over the place.
Exactly. So this is all I need to do now as a blue teamer to just be able to take some attack logic, press a button, I get a thing that I get an executable I can just run locally, and now I have an easy way to be able to do my own controls, right? I showed the depth of the technical just so everybody could see kind of the Radio Shack that's behind it, but this is totally Best Buy. I can just click that, click create it. Here, let's just do that real quick. Create campaign, and boom, it builds it for me. So there we see it. It's pending because the server actually has to just in time compile it. And then if I refresh.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, how do they end up deploying it? Is that through an agent you provide, or is that through MOM, or like how does that get pushed out?
Yeah. So the most common way is through the agents. So you pick the injection points where you want to be able to automatically schedule or inject this testing. And then after that, I mean, this thing can run headerless. We have the APIs are all exposed, and I'm even going to go a bit further and say they're actually documented. And because I know everybody says, yeah, we got APIs, but they're not documented. There's no examples. So reverse engineering an API is not a fun thing to do.
I know that from experience.
Yeah. So there's two aspects of integration. So one, you can run this in a headerless manner, which is ultimately my vision for Scythe. So my idea here is that Scythe is invisible. So every part of the enterprise that has a security use case requirement can, through an integration in their own tool, whatever that is, going back to the fact that before I deploy something, I should be able to check it. They can just press a little unicorn up in the corner, get the testing, get the data right there at the point of use in a form they understand, and then they move on. The second is the fact that, so this is the attack server, which means it is trying to maintain the tradecraft of the campaign. So I'll show this some ideas of what that means later, but there's always this balance of convenience and realism. So I want the attack to be as real as possible because that helps me. If I want to be stealthy, I get to actually be stealthy. If I want to be noisy, I can do that too. But I don't want the administrative overhead of the campaign to be tainted by
where does this server live? Is this in their prem, or do you have like a place where they can have it in the cloud? Because it seems like you'd want the indicator of compromise of egressing outside the network.
Yep. So we do both. We do on-prem and SaaS. On-prem, going back to our manufacturing and energy clients, they really like the on-prem because they're going into sensitive segments to be able to do testing.
Sure.
Some of the larger consultancies that use us, the same thing, because they want to have that, they have that trust with that customer. They want control over the customer's data, which of course we're more than happy to, like, yes, please, like, you manage that. You keep that. We don't want that.
Yeah, no kidding.
So it's both. And that allows that flexibility to be able to, as you noted, to test those egresses. We also include what we call bounce nodes. So it's just a VM that you can put in an EC2 instance, and that now acts as just a relay. So it's easier to be able to do what you're talking about, and I don't have to move my server around.
That's cool. Yeah, got it.
So back on the integrations, since the server is the point of truth to maintain OPSEC of everything that did or did not happen from the attacker view, we also automatically integrate that into your defensive tools. And we also expose that so you can customize those integrations or build your own integrations into your SIM, into your ticketing system, into your EDR, your choice. And so now what you get is, again, Scythe being able to say, well, this is what we did, because that's the truth of what happened, into, let's say, an EDR and going, well, what did you actually prevent or detect? And it's exposed right in there. And I'm going to show a little bit of that here because I'm obviously running on one computer. I don't have a CrowdStrike or a Splunk instance up, but I can show you some of the integration.
Sure. I'd love to see that.
Bryson, question about the agent providing the injection points. Can you talk a little bit about the context of the injection? Like, what kind of options exist for those injections?
What do you mean?
So you're compiling a binary, you're setting up your payload, your custom malware, and you're injecting it. Is there a specific way you're injecting that? Is there different options on how you want to run that exploit?
So first of all, not an exploit.
Not an exploit. Sorry. You're deploying malware. Right.
We are post-access malware. So we
That's
are
right.
assumed breach. Now you can tie us to initial access methods. So you can run an exploit that does a callback to the server. That's part of the idea behind the virtual file system here, is that you can load your own things that you can use between teams, or in the instances you described, that can call back, pull down the payload I'm interested in, or again, going to ransomware. I don't really want to do a call out to pastebin, so let's simulate pastebin, and that's the VFS that does that for you.
Okay.
So with respect, it's just agent to server connection, and the agent is running in memory, and it's gonna execute there at the privilege that has.
Okay, that helps. Thank you.
I kind of figured this would be a real technical discussion. Normally we get a lot higher level, but I'm trying to show y'all as many bones as I can.
Yeah, please do. Yep.
All right, so I showed you how we do threat intelligence that's automatically provided in the platform. I explained our upsell Empower, which we're doing targeted turnaround campaigns for your industry with an SLA. And then the other fun thing is we have the ability to build campaigns. So this is Volt Typhoon, and you can build this through a GUI. So this is just Volt Typhoon's logic, and you can see.
Hold on a second. We're still seeing the virtual file system view
I think
here.
There's.
There you go.
There we go. All right. Sorry. Yeah. There we go.
So here is the GUI builder with Volt Typhoon already populated, so we can come in here and you can see the logic of what it's doing, and you can modify these things.
How do you modify them? Just like click into it? Is that the?
Yeah. So you see over here, you can.
Oh, I see.
And then I can add in new ones.
Got it. Cool.
So again, user friendly.
Yeah. So how are people using it today when let's say they're doing a red team exercise? Do you kind of sit them down and kind of show them how to, tie it in with a netcat, or, tie it in with some like file uploader or something? Like, do you give them the sort of training on how to do that? Because I could see there being a bit of a disparity. It's like, well, this is a cool thing, but how do I get it into my system, through exploitation?
No, that part's really easy. Again, it's just a callback to a location for something you've already created.
Okay.
Where I see the challenge with red teams, in fact, this goes to my own history and learning the commercial world, is the original tool was built on C. And so I was like, hey, I built this modular thing. It's so easy. You just need to build your own module in C. That's when I learned red teamers are not developers in the commercial world, and C is not a language that is accessible. So we then, we've actually been debating patenting it. We created a custom in-memory Python interpreter. Here, let me show you. So this is the biggest part that we've had to really do the work with the red teams. So you can see we run all the different systems. There's modules for different kinds. Oh, this one's fun. Steganography. So you actually, the C2 automatically embeds exfiltration and commands into pictures over HTTPS.
And I'm sure DNS is a big one.
We don't see as many folks using it, but obviously it's key there.
Really?
Because the problem with DNS is when you're an operator, your heartbeat is really long. So DNS is something you would really only run from an automated perspective. So here I am building something from scratch. Again, I can start not from scratch. Like if I had that Volt Typhoon, it'll automatically build that from me. And now I have the ability to move things around, delete things, all of that. I can also build tests directly from Sigma. I can also build tests directly from MITRE ATT&CK. What's something you've always wanted to do, Robert?
Steal someone's clipboard. I don't know.
That would be under credential access, I think.
I always think it's fun stealing people's clipboard.
There you go, clipboard data. So you saw that. I just did text search.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do it using PowerShell. No additional wizard required. Boom. I've now stolen their clipboard.
Wow. That's amazing, actually.
And then, so when I was talking about the Python piece, this is that. Once I add that, you'll see a lot more of these these modules becoming available. So like this is Kerberos directly from Tim Medine, who created it. He actually wrote this module for us. This is, again, you can create your own Legos. And so this is where we have most of the conversation with red teamers, is showing them how they can, most of them are Cobalt Strike users, so we show how they can import BOFs. So the buildup they have of that, they can bring in here. The Python scripts that they've already built, we show how you can incorporate that and load that into the platform. And then in terms of building the Legos, we show them how to do that. That's where most of the training comes in.
Yeah, how do you do that? Is that is there like a builder for that too? Or is that one of those you just upload it?
Yeah. This isn't the best part right now. So it's all there. We've prescribed, essentially the IDE inputs and outputs for it. But we don't have a really strong test harness around that. Mm-hmm. It's there. Folks can use it. That's our biggest training point, is teaching that, because the workflow isn't 100%.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm being honest.
So
I like being honest. I like to make sure people understand exactly.
I appreciate honesty. At least then I know that I can trust you. What about stuff like spam? Like spam is a super common threat vector. It's not really the kind of thing that that people typically think of when they're thinking like APT, but it is oftentimes, you can pivot very easily. Something can start off as just spam, but like, do you have ways to detect that the spam has reached you? I'm thinking more the effect.
That's a preventative mail filter. So what we do is we provide the signal to test how you're managing spam or phishing. And so here's a Volt Typhoon campaign that's already been created, and I can get direct download links, so you can see all the formats that it's available in. This is my favorite, reflective injection. And so this would be the call out for what you would put into that spam or phishing campaign.
I meant the other way around. So the malware is a spamming bot, basically. Is there a way that you can pick up that it was successful on the other side? Actually, let me rephrase this question.
We're not doing, remember, we're post-access, so I'm not generating those email campaigns. What I do is I tie to the how you would test that.
Yeah, I actually understand exactly where you're coming from. I guess my long-term question, not for a today sort of thing, is do you see a situation in which you would start hooking in with SOARs and saying, okay, this thing that you ran worked, or this? Okay.
Yeah, we already are integrated with a couple of SOARs.
Okay, and how do you see that happening in the system? How does
So it really comes back to ease of use. So the SOAR is able to, again, run Scythe in a headerless fashion. So the SOAR integration calls in and says, hey, kick off this campaign, report back.
And the report back is that it was successful, or that the IOC was triggered. Yeah.
So why don't I show you what the data actually looks like? So here is a Volt Typhoon on an instance, and you can see individually, here's all the steps, because you remember it was like 60 some steps in the attack logic. So we can see the attack view of what succeeded and failed. All this gets fed back. And then, of course, my favorite part is that it actually, so like, let's click on something. So you can see what we did, and then you can see what the implant responded with. And that can include credentials and all of that. So all of this information gets imported or exported to the SOAR, to the EDR, to the SIM, wherever you want it. And I can show you an example of what that looks like as well. So let's go back to Volt Typhoon. Let's look at that host. And when I click over here on security events, Oh, okay. See, you can tell I'm live. Here's another one, APT41. So we can see the evidence of that, the detection ID. So this is how I can correlate that into my SIM. And I can put this directly in my SIM as well. So it looks the same thing. Yeah, that one's active too. So let's pick an active one. So this is another neat thing just from a red teamer perspective. I'm getting shell through my implant directly on box. Now what's different here is this isn't a traditional command shell. This shell automatically wraps your commands in the tradecraft of the command and control. The implant command and control. So for example, if I was doing that steganography, whatever I typed in here would automatically be encapsulated in steg over the environment.
Mm-hmm. Right. Or speaking DNS or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah, interesting. That's really cool. I wanted to see what happened.
Oh. Yeah, I've still got a lot of things to show you, so I'm trying to. Seeing IP config come back. I didn't feel like that was to be that interesting.
Well, just to see that it worked.
Oh,
want to see the image it was hidden in that it was uploaded.
You want me to roll my dice? No, it doesn't show you that. That's all again, transparent to you. That's the idea. I'm trying to build Best Buy here for offense, not Radio Shack. So I exposed the Radio Shack just so you can see the depth, because this is a very technical audience, and you can see how I can then cut to the Best Buy and go, okay, I see how he did that. It's not made up, because this is the problem I have with a lot of the competitors I have in this space. They don't do this stuff, but you look at the top and it's like, whoa, look at the pretty graphics, but they're not real.
Mm-hmm.
You're not getting security, you're getting GRC++.
Right.
So, here's my dashboard showing my work over time of what's happening in my environment. But now you've seen why I actually have confidence in that these mean something.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's see. I've shown attack flow. I've shown campaigns. I show how you can build campaigns. I show how you can deploy campaigns. Oh, integrations, where I was talking about.
Yeah.
I love this. Takes a while to load up because there are a lot of them.
As this is loading, just kind of a thought experiment. So I'm sitting with an auditor. We're going to go through and we're going to have a whole bunch of conversations. They're going to capture a bunch of evidence. Is there a vantage point or a consideration where I could give a read-only account to an auditor to go in here and take a look at the efficacy of the controls we're discussing? It's one thing for them to pull samples. It's another thing for them to think they're understanding the tooling or the infrastructure or the infrastructure's code or hard decisions we've made. This is hard evidence validating outcomes, right?
Yep. So here's what I'm showing you, right? I can define roles and users into the server. So that's how you can create somebody with limited access. This is also how you could have teams of different folks all doing different things with the Chinese firewall between them.
From a Chinese firewall standpoint, it strikes me that this could be a collaboration point between, let's say you're going to pull in a VAR or a specialized red team, and you're going to collaborate with my in-house red team on projects or specialized focus areas we lack expertise in. Are those types of collaborations possible through your platform?
Yes. Again, that goes back to that roles-based access control.
Yep.
And then
your comment about the Chinese firewall made perfect sense in that context, so I had to ask.
Yes.
I want to be explicit in interpreting my understanding.
I almost wanted to be funny and say the Volt Typhoon firewall. Yeah, so here we go. Here's the write-up on Volt Typhoon inside the threat catalog.
Mm-hmm. So, with the integrations, I saw a couple companies on there like Tenable. I'm not exactly sure what an integration with Tenable would do exactly.
So let me show you our vulnerability management alpha.
Okay, great.
So what's the problem with vulnerability management today? It's Sisyphean. I run Tenable. Tenable gives me 50,000 items and CVSS, and then Tenable, of course, has incorporated additional elements to is that even internet accessible? Because that's, of course, a key part of its exposure. But it's hard to give it context, right? We have EPSS, the exploit predictability scoring system, and CISA with their known exploited vulnerabilities, trying to give us some kind of the external view of applied intelligence. What do I care about because it's being used in by threats? Because that matters. And because doing work for something that is never going to get attacked, that's a waste of time. And then internally, I have the challenge of two parts. What's the business context of something? Because it turns out not all of my assets are created equally. And then the second part is, well, turns out I was already spending most likely a significant amount of money on enterprise defense. Why don't I get credit for how that mitigates the impact of a vulnerability? So that's what we built, is the alpha for that, which is the idea that I can run a scan. And do any of these have a lot? Yeah, there we go. Some of the Mac ones. So we can see that some of these, there's a lot of issues with them. And what I can do is I can automatically run a campaign that I control against those vulnerabilities to try to give what we call a harvest score. So how we did that is threats aren't monolithic. There's different value to what gets done on the defensive side, right? Something is not logged at all. Well, I have no visibility. Something's prevented. That's obviously the best, but obviously prevention is a limited part of what I can do in my tool set. Most defense is based on detection because it's the safest way for me to do something against anomalous behavior, but not break a legitimate business process or behavior, which is why we're very detection focused as an industry. So what I can do here then is see, well, was it logged locally? Was it logged locally?
I think we're missing a screen here, possibly.
Oh, did it stop?
Yeah, we're sitting on vulnerability scans.
Oh, yeah. I'm just talking.
Okay. Gotcha.
So I don't think I can actually kick it off in this view. So you'll have to forgive me on being able to demonstrate what I'm talking about, but that it does what I say.
Okay.
And so what it'll do then is that harvest score is looking at the success of each procedure against what we call the quality of the attack versus what the defense did. And then that gives you now, something that, takes the tenable vulnerability prioritization score that they have and now contextualizes it for you against impact.
Okay. So if they do, let's say, let me try to paraphrase. So if they find some command injection, regardless of whether it's exploited or not exploited, you can put something, some malware on that box to say, okay, if they had compromised, what did it have access to from there?
Yes, and that's why I call it alpha, because that's a basic step. Trey, going back to your earlier question, can I change the context it runs in? That's the next step of what we're trying to do, because obviously impact is going to be different if a vulnerability has sysadmin access root versus user access or something else like that, or it's tied to potentially already a lost credential. That's a key context to really understanding impact. Right now, it's a little simple.
Got it.
So the contextualization you're speaking to, does it come back with a recommendation that the red team can feed back to purple or blue saying, hey, this is the first three next best things we need to be doing in this environment?
So yeah, what we're doing there is we create.
You spoke to Sisyphus earlier, and so for the sake of argument, do all the things, patch all the things. Here's a hell of a vulnerability scan report, as opposed to these three things. Only do these three things, then we'll talk.
Yeah, so how we do that is through we provide Sigma recommendation. In fact, that's how I can show you. So I'm going to get over to assessments. Close that out. So I can see the assessments are run here. So we're
still on campaign details in our view.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go.
Thank you. Yeah, the sharing of this is fighting me. So there's two things that assessments does. It helps you manage the process of a red or purple team, but it also supports the detection part that you're talking about. So here we see a Volt Typhoon that's already been run. We can see all those steps, and we can see what the outcome of those steps is. And then
this is cool.
Wait. Okay, I gotta stop you.
Yeah. There's a lot going on here.
Okay, so do you have like a wrapper around each one of the Legos to see if the Lego worked? Is that what I'm seeing here?
Yeah, well, so a Lego is a capability. What the capability does in the environment is now a behavior or a procedure. And so that's what this is. These are all those procedures.
I think you said this before, but I didn't quite catch that you could log each individual action independently, which is That's a really interesting. I think I even saw it on a previous screen, but it didn't quite register.
Yeah. I appreciate there's so much that the tool can do. That's part of why, again, we've been focusing so much on making it just easier and abstracted. So the use of this tool isn't everything I'm showing you, because this is like expert user level. I mean, if I were just doing a simple demo, I'd just be like, let's go right into your sim. Let's show you how I'm putting things in your sim, high level, how I did that. And you're set to go. So that previous screen that you're referring to, Robert, was the customization of a threat, and where I can tell it to pause after each procedure, and I manually advance the behavior.
You're debugging the attack, as it were.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's kind of where I was getting. So I can see.
Well,
okay, so
debugging attack and defense.
Yeah. It's a step function. Check. Yeah.
Okay, so our exfiltration broke. Great. That's actually a good thing, not a bad thing.
Yes. No, that's a great thing, Robert. That's another area where I think we as an industry struggle is folks get hung up on, well, can I exploit? Can I do defense evasion? Why doesn't it do this or that? That's not the point, right? I want to validate the good and the bad. I want to be able to show, you know what? Actually, Defender does block that. Now, to advance to the next step, let's have Defender allow list it, and now let's see the next step of what happens. Because an attacker can absolutely, just like an exploit to get initial access, use an exploit to get around a control. So,
or a control failed, or they were troubleshooting and disabled. I mean, these are not impossible controls. Some of these controls degrade. That's right.
Exactly.
Yep.
And that ties into security as a constant fight against gravity. So I want to be able to capture, if you have a red team, their imagination and scale now comes into advancing the arsenal, not the repeated grind of red teaming the same thing over and over again. And then when they build that, now blue is able to just press a button and continually test it for whatever they want to do. And if you don't have one, that's why we include so much of this out of the box, and we continue to provide you the threat intelligence updates so you can stay current with us having already done the engineering for you.
This also gives you the ability to simulate a meaningful attack. I mean, let's speak to Voltyphoon for another moment, right? This campaign's been going for years.
Yes.
And so you may have a step function attack that is paused and stuck. And so in theory, this platform could allow a red team to, no, we've been working this campaign for 18 months. The 3 failure modes or misconfigurations we were waiting for have lit up. We're taking our next steps on that campaign, as opposed to, this was a time box assessment. We had 10 business days to do the work. This actually changes that MO entirely.
Well, and here's the other part of it. So let's say you're past that, right? Your team has been working this for a while, Trey, and you now really feel confident on you've got Voltyphoon dead to rights. But let's start throwing some variables in there. Let's start running that, and it's going to do credential capture slightly differently. Let's do it, and command and control, it's going to do DNS as opposed to HTTPS, which has been its primary command and control method, right? You start being able to introduce these variables around the attack logic, so you grow your capability from what it's doing today behaviorally to where they might be migrating, and you're going to get them before they get there.
Yes, and that's my point, is you are more honestly representing the adversary, as opposed to, I ran my tools, time-based assessment's done, looks good, high five, see you next year.
I ran the actual exploit code. It didn't run, so I guess we're good.
Yeah.
And you've now just described the incumbent breach and attack simulation vendors. That's what they do. They have a sandbox.
Elbow thrown, registered.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. I call a spade a spade. It is what it is. Their agents are sandboxes. They run defanged malware and exploit code. That's IOC to me.
Interesting.
This is fun, Bryson. I like this. This allows folks with varying levels of skills to contribute in an intellectually honest way to a proper adversary simulation, like truly taking your time, stepping through, trying different Lego configurations until you make progress. That's terrifying.
Yeah. So then back to that second part of the detection engineering, right? Did I expect this particular procedure to be prevented or detected? If so, what were my expectations around that? And I can rate it. But then going back to the original catalyst 10 minutes ago that led us here is, well, what are your recommendations? Here you go. Here's recommendations. Here are the Sigma rules we recommend around this. As you can see, this one is a broad one, so there's a lot. So you're not starting from scratch. Because the challenge, again, what makes security so hard is Your security is yours. Your environment is yours and is continually changing. If I could give you a universal rule to just stop the attacker, catch the evil bit, I'd gladly do so. But that's why the complexity comes in, because what makes sure a rule is dialed in for you, that's what you need to do. And that's where we're helping you do that on the detection engineering side. Again, including giving you a starting point on what to begin from, which you just saw me demonstrate. Hopefully you did. I can't tell when I'm sharing or not when I'm in the other screen.
This is good. So I'm just looking at all the different features here. So step would be what part of the malware it's running in. Objective, that's like more of a free-form text field. Actions is it looks like Markdown. Am I reading that right?
Oh, for what I was just showing?
Mm-hmm.
That was a Sigma in a GitHub. So again, I clicked on one of the random Sigma rules so you could see I wasn't just showing links to nothing. I was actually going to real world Sigma that's maintained.
Got it.
And we've tagged and correlated all those back in for you.
Got it. All right. Anything else you want to show us before we jump to the next set of questions here?
Nope. I think that is enough to overwhelm just about anybody.
All right. Trey, you want to go first or shall I?
Gosh, as a CISO, this is a dream, right? I mean, I've got a platform, probably living out in the cloud on some Scythe.io website that has backdoors and accessible command prompt injections and custom malware running. Forget compromising user accounts. Like, this is an amazing place.
Mm-hmm.
And more importantly, for your role, Trey, as the CISO, you have control and visibility over all of that. It's all auditable. Every action is captured and logged. Who can do what, where they can do it, all under your control. And the future state of this is I want to be able to give you that real risk dashboard, because this embedded in operations over time, the reason the single pane of glass always fails is because we try to build it top down. You got to build it bottom up, where it's not administrative overhead. It's naturally created as a part of somebody doing something.
Philosophically, I agree with you, but I'm thinking from the paranoia standpoint of I've pre-populated backdoors sitting across my environment tied back to your infrastructure, right?
Or your infrastructure. That's when the on-premises is there.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about how ripe this is, what a juicy target, what a salient target you're operating.
Well, if it's internal, it shouldn't. I mean,
correct. But that still makes him a juicy target in a number of ways. Super fun. How do you think about that? I mean, my preference is to have a platform like this built with attackers thinking about it as they architect it. So I'm sure you've built layers and layers into this. Yeah.
Yeah. So two things. One, and I don't want to throw shade at Mudge for Cobalt Strike, but I mean, Cobalt Strike is one of the thorns in the side of defense.
Yeah.
We have a testing tool that has become an actual threat. So that was the first thing. When I built this, I did not want to be in that position. All of the payloads are hard-coded to go back into the infrastructure, so the payloads themselves can't be misused in the context of what you're talking about.
Yep.
And the tool itself, we've always very much controlled the procurement process, so you cannot, you as an individual user can't buy this tool. This is only available to enterprises.
Yeah, you're going to have aggressive KYC. You've got ITAR considerations. There's layers and layers of overhead here.
So that's the first step, which ensures that my tool doesn't get into the wrong hands. So far, so good.
Yeah.
Because again, I mean, you have to reverse engineer something to then try to modify it for something else. It's almost like too much work.
Yeah.
It's easier just to do your own thing and use a lot of the open source tooling that's available. So the second part to your point. Okay, so we now have a SaaS server that's out there that has the risk that you're talking about.
Yeah,
we're obviously SOC 2 certified. But
hang your hat. Sounds like you're done. Way to go.
We did more than that. So last year, working with BugCrowd, we opened it up to folks just hammering on it, and we held our breath. But I got to say that the outcome of that, we had no criticals.
Wow,
we had
great.
one low. Which I think goes back to our background in being the enemy that would be going after it. Of course, there's always things you're not going to be thinking about. Vulnerabilities are always going to be there, but we have, from the very beginning, architected the entire platform from software agents to the server itself with that mindset.
I applaud the transparency. I'm a huge fan. Awesome.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so I think we pretty much well understand where your moat is. But is there any part of this that you might say it works so well that you would consider warrantying it, or that you already have a warranty around it? Like that you just could hang your hat and you know this part's going to work perfectly every single time.
That's one of the challenges with offense, because there's so many variables out there, right? If I run a Linux payload, if I don't have the right dependencies, it doesn't work. This was one of the hard parts with building the Python interpreter and extending it, was making sure you have the right libraries that are just in time compiled for the Python script you're running, right? And then you being able to customize things means you can do things that don't make sense. So I don't have anything that I've thought about warrantying so far.
Okay, got it. All right. Well, is there anything coming up in the future that you want to talk about, stuff you're working on that might be interesting to your listeners?
Yeah. So that assessments module that I showed you, I want to be able to offer that as a free community edition at some point later this year. So that's something where even if you don't use my tool, whatever you're doing, you're not using any tools, you can now have something that is able to track your process and support that to make it easier to use, because we get all caught up in the technical side of this, but the process maturity of running a risk assessment is its own thing. Mm-hmm. So that's the idea, is that tool will be out there for free to help people be able to do that. I mentioned earlier that controls testing, we're going to be providing even easier ways to do that. Again, I want to get to the best by one button click. So we're working on that too, tied to a number of controls. And we are collaborating with CIS to provide a version of that as well.
That's great. So eventually you want this to be a much more of a point-and-click platform. Is that what I'm getting at?
The whole goal, like I said, my future vision of this tool, I call it middleware for malware. Any security use case in the environment can run threat behaviors without any clue with what that hacker tool is doing in the background. They just click the little unicorn button in ServiceNow, in their SOAR, wherever they are, and it does all the work. They don't need to know, but they do get the data that they need to understand and get that insight. And now we're bringing security truly shifting left. Mm-hmm. Instead of just saying it. I'm so tired of people throwing these phrases around and nobody does it.
Preaching the choir there. All right, great. Well, Trey, any final thoughts here?
No, this is super fun. Super fun. I love what it's doing. I would love to see this feeding back into some of the, I hate to say the GRC tools, but this is evidence based on outcomes. Like, I would love to see you talking to Drata and some of the others on, like, look, we're talking about this. There's control points here where you can pull evidence for configurations. By the way, we've maliciously tested them in this way. Proof positive. Here's that trail. I'd love to see those integrations.
I agree. I think that would be really clever if you could standardize a list of things. I call it an SBOM for lack of a better term, but if you started treating yourself more like an evidence collector and less like malware, and use both as opposed to just one, I could see that being super exciting, super interesting.
Yeah, well, and as you've seen, we already generate that level of logging and event evidence at the procedural detail. And it's just an integration of putting that data somewhere else. I mean, you can export it in CSV and pull it in, but to Trey's point, I mean, again, I just want to be able to say, run Drata, do the compliance, Scythe's a part of that. That gets automatically swept into it, automated, does this.
Grab Drata, Vanta, Hyperproof, all the things, like literally hook in. What's this? This is an adversarial validation of the things that you think you're technical auditor person. Here's the story. This has been proven. Like, I love this idea.
So half of that is going to be what comes out when we release our hygiene and exposure testing capability, because then the next part is just integrating that output right into any of those tools. And I showed you the exposed integration piece. We obviously didn't dig into it, but you can drive that and we can drive that. It's middleware that is exposed that does that automatically. It's really convenient.
You can make compliance sexy, dude. I love this. This is going to be cool. That's awesome.
All
on
right.
that bombshell.
So how do people get in touch with you, Bryson, and also the whole Scythe team in general?
Well, I think I'm pretty easy to find. I mean, I'm I'm a public speaker. I'm all over the world. I think very easy to find me. LinkedIn, Twitter, Blue Sky. But our webpage, scythe.io. And if you send an email to sales@scythe.io or on the webpage, you can get a demo. We do free monthly training, two kinds. We'll do a webinar where we show our latest threat and we talk through the threat behavior, again, getting threat intelligence, to the level we want. And then the second part is we do hands-on workshops. So the one we have scheduled for the end of this month is on PowerShell abuse, because PowerShell is very, very powerful and is everywhere in your environment. And by the way, PowerShell is not just on Windows. So if you think you're a Linux or Mac shop and you're out of the wild, you are not.
Living off the land, all the way,
land,
everywhere.
yeah.
Yes.
So we do free workshops like that. So that's also off of our webpage, and it's every month. And that's with our research team, along with Jake Williams, Malware
That's
Jake.
great. Yeah, well, that actually sounds really exciting. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Great demo, and look forward to talking more.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.